I'm Ray Madursky, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to take the simple tart dough that we made in our first video and how to turn it into three really wonderful tarts. The first tart will actually be from the French repertoire, and it's a classic French apple tart. I'm going to make a really thick and wonderful apple compote that we'll put in the bottom of the pastry shell that's partially baked, and then we'll arrange sliced apples on top and finish baking it in the oven. The second and third tarts are going to be in pre-baked shells. So I'll show you how to roll the dough, put it into a pastry shell, and I'll talk a little bit about the different types of pastry shells and things, and then we'll blind bake all of the shells that we're going to use, and then we'll put some pastry cream into two of them. We'll put strawberries on one. So once again, it's kind of a French tart. But on the third tart, what I'm doing is I'm going to make a wonderful version of a Traubenkuchen, it's called. And it's from the German repertoire. And it's simply seedless grapes, and I use red and green. Put them in concentric circles in the baked shell on top of the pastry cream. Then you just glaze it with some melted apricot jelly. It sounds kind of unusual, but it's one of the greatest, most delicious tarts you could ever imagine, and it's really easy to do. So the first thing I want to do is real quickly, things you're going to need. You're going to need a rolling pin. There are all different types of rolling pins. This is the type I prefer. It's boxwood, and it's just very simple, easy to use. You want to have a dry pastry brush to get all excess flour away. You really need some version of this, a pastry scraper. I have about 3 of them. This is my oldest one, but it's the one I love the most, use the most, because we want to keep the dough moving on our work surface. So we use a little bit of flour because we don't want to put a whole lot of flour into the dough. And then we use this device to kind of move the dough, turn it, flip it over, things like that. Okay, now there are 2 major different types of tart shells that you'll find on the market. There's the type that's just a frame and there's no bottom. They come in all shapes, all sizes. These were the original tart shells, the tart frames that I used when I started baking back a long time ago. I bought these in Paris in 1980, actually. And what you have to do, though, you have to take a baking sheet and I usually put it upside down. I cover it with a piece of parchment, and then you place the frame on here and line it with the pastry. Then you have to refrigerate it to get it really chilled down after you form it, and then you just bake it right on the back. Some people will do them inside, I do them on the back. The tart pastry that we've made is pretty good. It doesn't leak butter. Some doughs that have a lot of butter might leak butter. You would not want to bake it this way if you were using puff pastry. If you were using puff pastry, which does tend to leak some butter, you'd want to have it on the inside of the sheet pan. Okay? So that's one type of a tart shell. The other type is the more common that you usually see here in America, and it's a frame with a removable bottom. These guys are great, and what you want to do is have the bottom in them. I still place them onto a cookie sheet simply because I think they're safer, it's easier to handle, and you get a better even baking with them. Now what we're going to do is pre-bake one of the shells partially, and we're going to fill it with the apple compote that we're going to make and put the apples on top, finish baking it completely. But then 2 of the shells that we're going to make, we're going to bake the shells completely, so we'll be blind baking the shells. To do that, line the pastry, get them in the fridge, then you dock the dough. Very important step. You have to take a fork, or there are tools for doing it, whatever you like, but I usually just take a fork, make a lot of little holes so that steam will come up from under the pastry. Then we're going to line the mold with the pastry in it, the tart shell, with some aluminum foil. Now, you could or you could not, it's up to you. I usually put rice, and it's the same rice. I've been using it for a couple of years. And I fill that, blind bake it, then bring them out after a period of time, dump out the rice, bring the foil off the tart shell, and then finish baking it completely. Some people just leave the aluminum foil, then remove it. They don't use any weights. It's up to you. Both techniques will work. What you might have happen if you don't weigh the pastry down is that a little bit of the edge might sink as it bakes. So after trying both ways, I've kind of decided I do like using the weights. You could use dry beans. You could use anything that's dry like that. I like the just simple white rice. What I recommend that you do not use are metal pieces, metal weights that they do sell for this purpose, but you tend to get dark spots from the metal. The metal gets very hot and then leaves a spot on the dough. So also, if you don't want to use aluminum foil, you could use a parchment paper to place on top of the pastry and then fill that with whatever you decide to weigh your dough down with. Okay, so those are pretty much the things that we have. Again, the removable bottom tart shells come in all variety of sizes, of shapes. Usually these guys look like this, and they almost always have the fluted edges on the sides of the tart. So let's get rolling, and I'll show you how to roll out a piece of dough that's been refrigerated. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is prepare our tart to line it with the pastry. These two shells have already been buttered. What I'm going to do is show you how I butter my third shell here. I like to use a small brush, get the butter on it. And the reason I enjoy using the brush over, say, a piece of paper towel or my fingers is that the edges of your tart pans are going to be very sharp. And especially when you start working with the smaller tart molds. So you really want to be careful, one, that you don't cut yourself, but also the brush does a really great job of getting into all the nooks and crannies. It does it very quickly, very efficiently. And there, we're done. That's all it takes to butter your tart shell. Okay, I've got my dough out of the refrigerator. I'm going to lightly flour my work surface. I'm going to put the cold dough down. I'm going to sprinkle some flour on the top of the dough. Now the first mold that I'm going to line is the larger mold, so I'm going to roll this out. And the larger mold is about 11 tart shell, I should say, the tart pan, is about 11 inches in diameter. The smaller one is about 9 inches. They're in metric, so they're a little bit more than those measurements. But you want to roll this piece of dough into about a 13-inch round. So the first thing you want to do is make the dough a little bit malleable. Use your rolling pin. Good way to take out lots of frustrations. And then just start rolling in all directions, from the center out, from the centers out. And keep turning, and actually we're going to keep reversing the sides of the dough as we roll. I can see streaks of butter in the dough, and that's what I want. That's actually a good thing. And you can see the dough is quickly working, and and it's really not fighting against the rolling. So we really have not activated, or overactivated, I should say, the gluten. So that's a good thing. That means we should be able to do this, line our mold, and then once the mold is lined, we're going to give the dough about 2 hours to relax again in the fridge. You'll see how I do that. I put the dough into the tart shell, then I dock it, then I put it in the fridge uncovered. Okay? So we go over all of that. Now, it's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be. What it has to do is accommodate the tart pan, and I think we're in good shape. So I'll give it a little bit more stretching here. I would say the dough is a little bit more than 1/16 of an inch in thickness. It's probably closer to 1/8 of an inch, the thickness. And I think if you're a beginner, the thing to do is whatever's comfortable. If you're really comfortable, you make pies a lot, you're in good shape. You want to get this as nice and as thin as you can, because that's where the delicate tart, the European style tart, really differs from the American pie in the delicateness of the dough. Now don't forget, this is an all butter dough. There's no other fat, there's no lard, there's no solid shortening or anything like that in this dough. Now I folded it in half. I've gone over in quarters. This is just my personal preference as to how I like to get the rolled dough into the tart shell. There's my tart pan. I keep saying tart shell, I really should be saying tart pan. Now, we're going to do this, and then we're going to flip it out like this. Now what you want to do is now kind of roll the dough in to the edges of the tart pan, okay? One spot here it's a little bit short, but that's really not a problem. The great thing about working with any pastry dough is if you make a mistake, you can fix it. You can use another little piece of raw scrap dough, fill in mistakes, just use a little bit of water to act like a glue if you have to paste something together, and it really works well. There we are. We've got our tart shell beautifully lined, and now I'm going to use the rolling pin to go off and to actually trim the edges. Now these scraps make wonderful cookies. I have friends down at Auburn who are here from Bulgaria, and at Thanksgiving time I made a lemon curd tart, and the leftover cookies my friend Kalina used to make the leftover tart dough rather, Kalina used to make cookies for Christmas for her children. So this is great stuff. Don't throw it away. Alright, now the next thing we want to do is get a fork and dock the dough. Docking the dough simply means putting a lot of little air vents into it. And what I do is just go around all directions, and I even do the sides. So I'll even do something like this, so that when the dough is baking, steam will be able to come out from under, and we won't have big air pockets that bake into the dough. Okay, I think you can see that. Now we're just going to put this in the fridge for a 2-hour rest.